The great sport of rugby has been played at Yale University for over 150 years. The Yale rugby program has a very rich history and is one of the oldest programs in America.
You know, when you ask when did rugby start in America, it really wasn't rugby. Rugby didn't exist. It was football in the sense that it was a game one played with their feet. It was something of a free-for-all. There could be as many as 50 people on a team at the time. No rules existed. Most of the colleges started to play some sort of this game. They played something at Harvard, they played it at Princeton, they played at Rutgers, and they all played by their own rules and regulations.
The sport of rugby at Yale was embellished by a few people who had rugby experience before they came to Yale. Once they had the basis of these sporting people, it made a difference.
Early images of rugby at Yale were captured by Yale student and well-known artist Frederick Remington. His drawings have become iconic images of 19th century rugby.
When you get to 1860, the game really comes to a halt at Yale because the faculty just felt that it was way too violent a sport and it was just getting out of hand. Despite the fact that it was canceled, there obviously was still a passion for this new game in town and a great interest in it, so that it wasn't long before it started up again, thanks to a fellow by the name of David Schaff. Schaff was attending Yale. He was a British subject originally. He'd gone to prep school in Germany where he had played rugby, as it is officially known at the time in England, rugby. Again, the faculty intervened and said, no, we're not playing this game here. At which point Schaff decided that he really needed to form some sort of association to organize this game so that it would appear more legitimate in the eyes of the faculty and the powers that be at Yale. So he did, and he formed the Yale Football Association. And this is where we first see some effort at trying to make rules to make this a real game as opposed to 5,000 versions of a game. So, you know, as all these colleges began to form these rules, obviously their end result, they hoped, was that they would be able to play intercollegiate games as opposed to just playing different classes at their own school. And in November of 1872, Yale sent out its first challenge. And the challenge went to Columbia. And on November 16th, the very first official rugby game was played in New Haven between Yale and Columbia. All of a sudden there's an audience for these games. By the time you get to the 1880s, you're looking at thousands of people coming. So it's really a fun beginning in the sense that everyone's taking notice of this new game that they're playing. In the late 1870s, they decided that they would have an annual Thanksgiving Day game, which would be between the two top teams. And this is the point where it becomes the thing to do, to be at the Thanksgiving Day game. They started to play them on the Polo Grounds in New York City, and thousands of people would descend upon the polo fields to watch this Thanksgiving game, much like it is today when you watch the Thanksgiving game.
Rugby was being played, you see, in the 1880s, but then American football, as I call it, became the dominant sport.
Walter Camp is the most iconic figure in Yale rugby history. A captain of the team, Camp played a pivotal role in evolving the game into what we now know today to be American football.
Of course, if you're going to talk about rugby and eventually football, you really have to talk about Walter Camp. A name that even if you know nothing about rugby, you certainly will have heard of if you've ever watched American football. He started out as a rugby player in 1876. He had a passion for the sport, but for better or for worse, he also is the instigator that causes the shift from rugby to football in America.
Walter Camp was an athletic guy, and he basically was watching the expats, as they're called, the students from from London and England and Australia and New Zealand playing rugby on the fields, and was very intrigued by it, and basically took his experience watching the expats, the other Ivy League teams play each other, and used it as an impetus basically to start and form the game of football, which we now know. And obviously it had many changes have taken place, but it was that early experience at Yale watching the rugby match that helped lead to the foundation for American football today.
When local rugby teams had disagreements between rules, there were committee meetings in which he would attend to help solidify a set list of rules. This committee, featuring Yale, Columbia, Rutgers, and Princeton, was named the Intercollegiate Football Association. The newly created rules evolved into modern football, thus temporarily eliminating rugby at Yale.
Camp represented Yale at every single one of those conferences until 1925, and was absolutely just critical in every change that happened.
Later known as the father of American football, Walter Camp spent 5 years as the head football coach at Yale. In those 5 seasons, he led them to 3 national championships before later coaching at Stanford.
By the late 1800s, rugby as we know it today had virtually disappeared from the East Coast. There was an almost 50-year gap where rugby was not played in the East. And thanks once again to a British gentleman by the name of Harold Cooper. It was started up here again. But what's funny about this time too is that Yale and a lot of the colleges made a big deal of cautioning everyone that, yes, rugby is a wonderful game, we're happy to have it here, but it's not going to replace football. It's not going to become a school sport. It's going to remain a club sport. And to this day, of course, it is still a club sport.
Rugby, I've always thought, is the best game in the world, and therefore they ought to be able to play it. It wasn't so easy. We had to find ourselves a pitch, which we did, near the Armory. And then we found the parking people wanted to throw us off that field when the Harvard game, football game was going on, because they wanted to put the cars around in that space. So we got the teams to lie down where the cars could get in to stop them coming on, so at least we could have the oldest game between Yale and Harvard ever was the rugby game, which was first started in 1880 something. I've forgotten which exact year. So I thought it was too bad that they got no memory of their own traditions.
The Yale rugby program has had many iconic figures through its nearly 150-year existence. Perhaps the most notable figure was the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush. He played on the team's first 15 in 1968.
I actually found him to be just a kind of a regular guy. We've got a great team picture from '68 when George was a senior. That group, everybody did really, really quite well. I think if you had asked who was going to be president, people wouldn't have guessed George. But I always thought he was a really decent human being. He was a senior who was really nice to me as a sophomore. That's all I can say, and I appreciated it tremendously.
Not known for his athleticism, Bush was remembered as a hard-working and committed member of the team.
He could catch the ball well, could get rid of it well, and knew what he should do with it, even though he'd just come onto the field to learn a little bit about it.
1978 was a historical and breakthrough year as the first official Yale women's rugby team was formed.
There were really limited sporting opportunities for women on campus at the time, and so Nina complained about that, and I said, well, Nina, if you are the captain and will do the organization, I'll coach it. And after 3 or 4 more beers, I completely forgot about the conversation, and lo and behold, in January of 1978, I got a phone call on my black dial-up set that we had in the rooms at that time. And it was Nina Duker, and she said, we're having an organizational meeting tomorrow night at Payne Whitney, and you'll be there, won't you? And that was the beginning.
1981 was my second year of rugby at Yale, and one of the things that happened that year that was hugely momentous for me is we decided to take a tour to Zimbabwe.
You know, in 1980, Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, and it went from the white minority rule, like South Africa, to a majority rule. So we were the first international team to go in there in many, many years, because they had been under UN sanctions for quite a while.
Rhodesian teams were barred from the Olympics. They were barred from most of the major international sporting competitions. Foreign teams would not go to Rhodesia because sports had been used in effect as a tool to force change on the government. The country had been renamed Zimbabwe, and the country had a great history of rugby. So I thought, well, let's us be the first team ever to go and international team to visit this newly independent country of Zimbabwe and bring the sport of rugby from New Haven to Harare, the newly named capital of that city. And it seemed like sort of a great idea until we had to pay for it, until we had to fly to it, until we had to compete against it. All of which were nightmares, frankly.
The fun story is on the way to the airport, we didn't think we were going to make it. It was a snowstorm, and we were on a bus headed out of New Haven to try to make the airport at Kennedy, and we ended up on the wrong ramp, and they had to take the bus across the median strip to get us going the other direction to make the plane in time. So we were greeted with great fanfare. Basically by the white community.
It was also, shockingly, to me, naively, 100% white. And so we went to this newly independent African country and found ourselves immersed in a deeply racist, deeply mean-spirited, if I can put it that way, white culture.
You know, they were so hungry to play somebody other than South Africans and themselves that it almost became a competition of who could beat us worse. So we lost all 5 games by sort of ever-increasing margins. We had a great time, but we were a little overwhelmed.
There was no way they were going to lose a game to a bunch of college kids from Yale.
The Ivy League is well known for its athletic rivalry games. Another was added in 2002 when Princeton offered Yale the opportunity to play an annual spring match, which they gladly accepted. The game was later given the title of the Kuranda Cup, in memory of Princeton alumnus and rugby captain Rob Kuranda. He tragically died in 2003 in a Chicago porch collapse accident.
We decided with Yale to establish an annual tournament to both mark Rob's passing, but also to really mark the friendship and the collegiality that both Yale and Princeton rugby have always shared with each other.
It's one of the most important pieces of hardware that we play for, and there have been epic battles back and forth every year, and no matter how good each team is or how bad each team is, generally the games are very well played games like this today, and we play it hard. We want that cup back every year.
The thing that strikes out about the Kuranda Cup is that no matter how the teams have done over the season, whether we finish 6-0 or 0-6, it's always a very, very tightly contested game. And you can tell that there's a lot of emotion from both sides. It's really the highlight of the spring season. So it means a lot for both teams, and it's great to just get on the field and play a very, very intense game of rugby.
For a game that's like meaningful like that, you don't entirely think about it when you're on the field. You know, like all you want to do is beat Princeton. And but when you look back, especially like when we're on the bus going back, or especially when we're on the bus there and everyone's kind of amped up and hyped, and I think like emotions just kind of rise.
To play for someone who kind of stood for the ideals of rugby that means so much and make it so much more than just a game, adds a bigger incentive to the game.
The Yale Rugby Football Club is a significant piece of American sports history. For a program with such a rich past, the team understands they must live up to the program's early success.
We train Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 till 6, and the training normally is pretty fitness oriented on a Tuesday, and then kind of build towards game situations on a Thursday and Friday, and yeah, just try and really get the guys going on a Friday night just before they go to bed and wake up for the game on Saturday.
When everybody steps on the field, they need to take a certain amount of responsibility that this is their property and that it's something they need to defend and fight for. You get on the field, you strap your cleats on, and you have to be a Yale rugby player, and you're an ambassador of Yale rugby's history. And I think that more and more we've taken that attitude in a really positive way. When we're on our field, whether we're playing Dartmouth or Harvard or Brown or whoever it may be, we always take tremendous pride in the tradition of the players that have gone before us on that field, that have worn our jersey, and the players that we think will come after us and take this program to another level.
One of the things I recognized along the way was the program was very poorly funded. There was a huge alumni base and a lot of interest and support, but it never gotten organized. When I graduated, I started getting involved in trying to fix the funding situation, and determined after looking around that what we really needed was an Alumni Association. So working with the captain of the club at the time, and his name was Micah Block, founded Friends of Yale Rugby, which has then evolved into the umbrella Alumni Association for both men's and women's rugby. And we sent out a call and got a lot of alums involved, got the budget up to a much more appropriate level pretty quickly.
Yale is just sorely in need of additional athletic facilities.
So a clubhouse is really central to furthering all of the goals of the program.
It's someplace people can go and hang out and watch the matches.
It'll makes the program look a lot more serious to guys who've maybe played varsity sports at Yale and want to try rugby, or people who are quality rugby players who are looking at different options to go to college. First provides the players a quality, going back to those goals, quality environment. It's not necessarily fun to have to change in the ground or behind a tree, in the rain, and not be able to take a shower. So just improve the experience.
So it would be locker room facilities, and it would be a gathering place where we could have events like the alumni dinner or match viewing or different things. Alumni Weekend started approximately 8 years ago as just an opportunity to get people to start coming back to show their interest in the program and supporting the program and getting back together with their teammates. And it's one of those things where, first couple of years you get 15 or 20 guys back and it continues to grow, and the people that come once have a tendency to come back, and then they start reaching out to their teammates and broadening the network.
Coming back to the Alumni Weekend is really something, at this point I've been doing probably about 5 years now in a row, something I look forward to every year. It's great it's great to see people across a variety of classes rather than just the class that you were in at college, and people doing a variety of different things, anywhere from 5 years out of school to 35 years out of school, and just you all have this rugby heritage in common, and it's just great to get together and renew that and just hang out with each other.
But when I came to Alumni Weekend, I knew the team had existed for as long as it had, but there's something different about meeting the people who've played this sport, 10, 20, 30, even 50 and 60 years ago, who still come back every single year to be part of this tradition, to even just watch the Knobs game or to watch the undergrad play the recent alumni and just see how the program is growing and how it's transforming, and how every year you have a new group of Yale undergraduates who get to experience this wonderful tradition.
I think probably the greatest thing is, and the reason I joined in the first place, is the team itself, the camaraderie. The game is fun, but kind of what draws people and what keeps them coming back is the teammates and the bonds they've formed.
It's so fun to be here with all the alumni. Just to see that they were doing the same stuff we were doing. They had the same kind of friendships that we have. That means so much to us as undergraduates. Just to have the sense that, in 20, 30, 40 years, we're going to be doing the same stuff we are now.
It's hard to put into words how meaningful it is to have this connection with people that you've never met, that have never met you, but that have shared this unique experience and that want to continue to experience it year after year after year, after they've graduated, after they've gone through their professional lives, after they've retired. There really is nothing like it in the world or at Yale.
What is exceptional about the program at Yale is that whether you're a freshman or a sophomore, or back in my day, a graduate student, you were introduced to a large set of friends right off the bat. your rugby teammates were your friends. You practiced together, you played games together, you traveled together, and a lot of those friendships have remained solid throughout the years.
But I do think there is something in this magic of sport that is more than just winning and losing, but it's the power to cultivate human relationships that have a different vector. You know, there's a different vector here, and the vector is a little bit more natural, a little bit more physical, a little less in my head, and a little more relaxed as a result, to just be able to be in my body tomorrow at 11, strap on a pair of boots, run like hell, take my hits, and come back later to say we were in it together.
Rugby at Yale is one of those really, really special things. You know, I was fortunate to have been there when I was there. It really was special, and the mixture of people that you got, from professors to graduate school students to doctors to locals to undergrads to, you know, Malcolm Cormack was the curator of the British Museum. You know, those are unique things. But one of the real benefits, and this was the observation that I made, is as a result of that, I have multiple groups of lifelong friends